Start at 10 in the morning, and 12 hours later, we'd smoked, gotten yelled at, annoyed each other, hit each other, but we hadn't actually gone anywhere. Even worse, I couldn't really drink or smoke as much as the other kids because my mom was like the Gestapo. Whenever I came home from anywhere, she'd grab me by both sides of my face and tilt my head down so she could give me a big kiss on the top of my head. While she was telling me how happy she was to see me and how much she'd missed me because it had been nearly a whole day since I'd seen her, she'd take a big whiff to see if she could smell smoke or alcohol. I hated that, but she did it with all of her kids. I blame Anthony. Once he went to the Felt Forum, the theater next to Madison Square Garden, to see The Doors. He smoked a lot of pot that night and came home around 2 in the morning. Everyone was asleep, but he was still seeing things. So he popped open his bedroom window and lit up another joint. Suddenly, my mother jumped out of the closet and yelled, "Aha! I caught you!" Sadly, Anthony realized he wasn't tripping. He was slammed back into real life with our mom. I would get antsy hanging around the park every day, not drinking that much, barely smoking, not going anywhere. Around this age, I started to develop the wanderlust my brothers had. Once I was old enough to know better, being at home was the last place I wanted to be. One day, months before I entered middle school, I hopped on my bike and rode over to the junior high. I was curious to see what the school was really like. I arrived after the final bell had rung. School was out, but the doors were open, so I walked in to get a drink and have a look around. That's when I had a world according to Gart moment. I heard a commotion down one of the hallways, turned a corner, and in front of me was a lunchroom. The double doors were wide open. The benches and tables were pushed against the walls, and there were wrestling mats on the floor, and there was lots of yelling. The coach spotted me and yelled at me to get the hell out of there, but I stood transfixed. That was it for me. All I knew was pro wrestling and turnbuckles, but this just looked so cool. It looked hard. It looked like it had to be strong and very macho. I was none of those things, so this might have been the appeal. When I finally got into 7th grade, I was absolutely the worst wrestler on the team. The older guys relished twisting me, pinning me, and just plain beating the shit out of me. I really didn't have any idea what I was doing, but I loved practice. I loved trying to get better and seeing the smallest hints of improvement, even if I was the only one who noticed them. I was so committed, I went into a week-long wrestling camp at Hofstra University in Uniondale between 7th and 8th grades. I got better. I even allowed myself to think I was getting good. I wrestled at 136 pounds. There were 2 wrestlers in each weight class on our team, but local meets only allowed schools to enter 1 wrestler from each class. So my team had wrestle-offs where the guys in each weight class went one-on-one to see who got the tourney spot. I didn't win a single wrestle-off in 7th grade, but in 8th grade I did, again and again. Then I started to win matches, too. The coach loved me, and I was seen as a rising star on the team. Until, of course, I fucked up. I was hanging out on the tennis courts at school one day, toward the end of 8th grade, when a teacher strolling by saw me smoking a cigarette. She told the wrestling coach. The coach was such a good, young, supportive guy. We could relate to him. We loved him. So it was crushing when he kicked me off the team with only 2 weeks left in the season. I couldn't bear to tell my parents. Instead, I spent time hanging out at a friend's whose mom was never home. I stayed there until dinner. When I got home, I'd tell my parents, "Oh, practice was really exhausting today." My mom probably had no idea until now. Sorry, Ma. It wasn't a particularly good time for me to be fucking up. While her moods became less erratic over the years, my mom was never cured. Even when she wasn't depressed, she was always ready for a fight. One Saturday morning, my buddy Steve was over, and as usual, she was railing against me. As I got older, I gave it right back, and on this particular morning, the fight ended with me at the bottom of the stairs in our basement, and her at the top of them, heaving an Electrolux vacuum cleaner at me. It landed with a thud in the middle of the steps and rolled down, stopping at my feet. Steve said, "What was that all about?" "Nothing. It's just Saturday morning," I answered. The tension level in the house when I was in middle school was unusually high because my father was out of work. My dad was stubborn, and, well, he was the Mott Street gambler, so he wasn't afraid to play a game of chicken. He was very good at selling ice cream, so good that when his boss started his own company making a high-end premium brand of ice cream, my dad was recruited as one of the first salesmen. The company was called Häagen-Dazs, which looked nice but meant nothing. The guy who started the company, Reuben Mattis, grew up in the Bronx. My father once explained the company's philosophy to me. Most other ice creams were selling for 65 cents a gallon, but we sold it for $1.25 a pint. The idea was that if it sounded exotic and it was expensive, it must be good. And it was. There were nights when my dad came home and his trunk was loaded with Häagen-Dazs. The pints used to come in sleeves of 8, and his car would be weighed down with ice cream packed in dry ice. We had an extra freezer in our basement dedicated to rum raisin, strawberry vanilla, and chocolate, my favorite. We had so much of it we didn't even use bowls. Instead, we'd put the first letter of our name in magic marker on the bottom of a pint, eat a little bit, and then just put it away. Haagen-Dazs started to do really well, and the company was growing, but my dad thought Rupert wasn't delivering on some of the compensation promises he'd made when the company first started, so my dad just quit. He felt betrayed, and for a while, the Mattis name was a dirty word around our house. The real problem was that my father didn't have another job lined up, and he wasn't making all that much to begin with. The only savings I knew about were in an old water cooler jug in my parents' closet that was filled with coins, mostly pennies. My family struggled for 3 years after my father quit his job throughout my time in junior high, but he handled it the same way he did everything else, with old-school stoicism. He'd never say that he felt scared or ashamed, but I knew it was killing him because no one I knew worked harder than my father. He could be puking on the side of the road on the way to work and not turn around to come home. He refused to go on the dole. Instead, to make ends meet, he hustled to scrape together a few dollars, just like when he and my parents were first married. Only this time the stakes were higher. He got involved with a guy who had a startup pantyhose business. Then he tried selling ladies' clothing and handbags at flea markets. We were barely paying the bills. My mom did the food demonstration at department stores, but she could never keep a job for very long. Before he quit, I knew we weren't rich, but if I wanted to go to Nathan's or if I asked my dad for a couple of bucks to go hang with my friends, it was never a big deal. Now when I asked, he couldn't give it to me. The man had never been out of work in his life, and I could feel the pressure mounting. I quickly learned not to ask for stuff. I knew things were getting bad when the summer before 8th grade, I didn't make that annual trek to the department store for new school clothes. My father was working in the clothing business at this point, and all I wanted was a new pair of Levi's, but there was no way we could afford them. Instead, my father had a box of a brand called Cheap Jeans at the warehouse. He brought those home, and that's what I wore when school started. Of course, I got made fun of. There was a big label on the back of the pants that read, Cheap Jeans. It was humiliating, but I never told my father because I knew it was worse for him. Once our phone was turned off. That wasn't something that happened to people we knew. I remember a buddy telling me at school that he had tried calling me, but he kept getting a strange message from the phone company and couldn't get through. I just told him I didn't know what was going on, even though I knew exactly why he couldn't reach me. Another afternoon, I came home from school and there was a man in a suit sitting in our living room. The sheets were off the couch. That meant someone important was over. The man in the suit was talking to my father in the middle of the day, and as soon as I walked in, I could see this wasn't a conversation for me, so I went straight to my room. The man left a few minutes later, and I heard my father screaming, "I've been paying this mortgage for 10 years, and you come after me because we're a month late?" Then he swore like an army medic under fire. It's not like I hadn't seen financial stress in the house, but before this it seemed like something out of an I Love Lucy episode. Once a month my dad would break